I'm George Dennison. I have the honor of serving as president of the University of Montana, and I take it as a very distinct privilege to welcome you to this session this evening, Focus the Nation. It began, as you know, last evening with a webcast entitled The 2% Solution, which focuses on what one of the commentators defined as, or explained as, the defining issue of our time. To open our panel this evening, we have a person who has spoken eloquently and acted even more eloquently on the issue of global warming, climate change, and emissions, and finding ways in which we can address that issue in a timely way and then move forward to a solution. It's my really very great pleasure to introduce a man who needs no introduction in Montana, or needs no introduction to a group such as this committed to solutions to what is the problem of our time. Please welcome, if you will, the Governor of the State of Montana, Brian Schweitzer.
Thanks, George. Thank you very much. Thank you. My dad's 87 years old, and he grew up the son of Montana homesteaders. Last year I was sitting with Dad, and you know, if you ask an old-timer some questions, you'll learn a lot. So I was sitting with Dad, and I said to Dad, Dad, what was the biggest change in your life when rural electrification came to the farm? He considered the question, and then he said out loud, well, the REA was formed during the FDR administration in 1932. We had a situation in this country where we had islands of poverty and an ocean of prosperity. All of the small towns across America, all of the farms across America, they didn't have investor utilities that would invest to bring copper wires to them. And so the New Deal, as part of the New Deal, they said, we're going to deliver electric wires to every farm and small town in America, and the rural electrification program. How many of you grew up in a place, or you still use rural electrification? Yeah, probably even more of you than no. But the point is, the question I had for my dad, what was the biggest change in your life when those copper wires came to the farm? He thought about it after we talked about how it was formed, and he said, well, you know, I suppose the biggest change in my life was that we could weld at a little hotter temperature on the farm. You know why? Because they'd had wind turbines on that farm since 1925. In 1925, 1930, 1935, all across eastern Montana, the Dakotas, Kansas, Nebraska, Texas, Minnesota, we had clean and green, zero-carbon electricity produced. We had batteries in the basements, and those farms were living off the grid. They were producing their own electricity, and then one day, a copper wire arrived at the farm connected to a coal plant 1,000 miles away. And that was progress. Now, my dad did say that the problem always was the batteries. 75 years ago, battery technology was such that they were bulky and they'd only last a few years. But, you know, all in all, clean and green energy all across the prairies of America. And now Congress, Washington, D.C., you've been watching. How will we ever get to a position of producing domestic, clean, and green energy? Whatever shall we do? Well, I've got some ideas. You know, when I was elected governor of Montana, we produced less electricity with wind power than nearly any state in the Union. We were producing less electricity with wind power than Rhode Island. Now, Rhode Island's not even a decent-sized ranch in Montana, and they were producing more electricity with wind power. And during my first legislative session, I pushed the legislature. I said, look, we ought to lead the country. Now, I was the first governor in America to sign something that is 25 by 25. The notion that by the year 25, we ought to produce a minimum of 25% of the energy that we consume in a sustainable way. Wind power, solar power, and tide. That's a good start. I was the first governor to sign on. I think about half the governors have signed now, over half the members of Congress. But in 2005, the proposition before the Montana legislature was we ought to pass legislation so that 15% of the electricity we consume in this state by 2015 will be from wind power. Oh, you had to think I was trying to kill somebody. The utilities said, oh, that is ridiculous. In fact, they brought in these lobbyists from all over America. They didn't have enough in Helena. So they brought them in from all over the place, and they said to these legislators, what in the heck's the matter with this governor? Wind power? Well, we're a state with coal. We've got 1/3 of the coal in America, 10% of the coal on the planet. We've got gas and oil and big hydroelectric dams. Why would Montana develop wind power? And they said it would be too expensive, wind power. And wind power, that's for hippies living on a mountaintop, smoking marijuana. Real energy comes from coal. Well, by 2 votes, we managed to get the legislature to pass it. What's happened since then? Well, let's see. We've had over $350 million invested in the wind energy business in Montana. There's another $2 billion will be invested in the wind energy business in Montana during the next couple of years. The project's already on the way. And you know what else we found out? We found that we can produce electricity with wind power in Montana cheaper than we can with old coal technology. We found out that not only is it cleaner and greener, it costs less money. So you see, the utility industry, living 50 years ago in today's world, was just not telling us the truth. Now, a couple of years ago, Richard Opper, you're going to hear from him in a little bit. I got to tell you something. Richard Opper is the director of the environmental quality here for the state of Montana. And he has very few qualifications to have that position because you see, and this is probably a secret I shouldn't tell on him, he actually got a master's degree from Montana State University in soil science. I don't know how that qualifies him to be the director of environmental quality of the state of Montana. But Richard came to me one day and he said, Brian, I have an idea. We ought to put together a climate change commission. We ought to get a group of people from across Montana, and it's more than just looking at how we can reduce our carbon footprint in Montana. We ought to look at the consequences of the change to our climate. And while we produce, I think, somewhere around 0.2% of the carbon dioxide in the entire planet, the consequences of the rest of the planet are coming to Montana whether we like it or not. So Richard put a group of people together. They've been working on this for the last couple of years, and they brought to me 54 recommendations about climate change. Some of the things has to do with what's going to happen in Montana when we have less snow, earlier snow melt, means less water for irrigation, less water for hydroelectric. It means that the vegetation is going to change, the timberline is going to increase. The prairie islands of ponderosa pine and bull pine in eastern Montana will probably disappear, and they will become grasslands. There's a lot of consequences, and some people think that climate change is going to affect the people living on the coast the most. You know, you raise the level of the ocean and they have to move back a bit, hurricanes, catastrophic weather. Actually, the change will be greater here than it is on the coast because we don't have the buffering effect of hundreds of miles, thousands of miles of deep ocean. All of that water has a buffering effect. We, in the continental climates, in particular along the Rocky Mountains, we are already seeing the effects of much more rapid change in our climate than you do on the coasts. We can expect that as we go forward, we will continue to have warmer winters, less snowpack, earlier melt, and that snow that refreshes and renews the water supply of most of this country. As many of you know, 70% of the water that flows in the Missouri River drainage system, the largest river system in the United States, comes from the snowmelt of Montana. 50% of the water stored in the Columbia River Basin system is stored in Montana. And we're the only place in the United States where this new fresh water renews every year and flows to the Pacific, the Atlantic, and to the Arctic. Some of the most important land in Montana would be the watersheds of Montana. And every year for thousands of years and beyond, Montana has created a water system for this continent where we renew and refresh, we filter, and we are at risk. Because as the climate is changing, the vegetation that currently is on the landscape will change. The spruce, the pine, they are now finding a situation where they're on the edge of their ecological capabilities of surviving. In some cases, the larvae that attack these trees, they need very cold temperatures, in particular later in the winter, to arrest the development and kill the larvae, and we haven't been getting those kinds of winters. By the way, when the cell phone goes off, that is $50 for Montana State University Foundation, so just so we know. And as we find a change in the climate, those trees begin to die. And now we have millions of acres of dead and dying trees in British Columbia and northwest Montana. And it's simply nature's way of saying those are the wrong trees for that landscape. As they die, nature will take over, lightning will strike, they will burn, new kinds of trees, new species will arrive and begin to prosper. But in the process, in a very short period of time, with this great abundance of wildfires, there's going to be a great deal of siltation. Remember we talked about some of the most important things that we do in Montana is supply this refreshing, clean water supply on an annual basis? Well, we're going to lose a good filtration system over the course of the next 50 years as we change this vegetation. One of the recommendations that the climate change recommended to me was that we join the Western Climate Initiative, and that is joining together with British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and now Montana. We are members of the Western Climate Initiative, and we are dedicated to decreasing our carbon footprint substantially. And we're not going to wait for Washington, D.C. Congress ought to act. Congress ought to create legislation so that we have a level playing field. This is something that ought to be done at a federal level, but they are not moving. They will not move. And so the states are taking the lead. We are saying, in absence of leadership in Washington, D.C., we will lead. We will decrease carbon. And we will embarrass Washington, D.C. to follow. I don't know what the heck happens. We pick leaders, we send them to Washington, D.C., and they become followers. But if they won't lead, you will. And we will lead in places like Montana. Part of the recommendations that we had is we had to decrease our carbon footprint. So I said, well, fastest way of decreasing our carbon footprint would be to decrease our consumption of energy, because the energy sources that we use today are almost assuredly hydrocarbon. So I challenged state government to decrease. In fact, the people who work for me, I told them, you will decrease your consumption of electricity and natural gas by 20% by 2010. And so the agency directors came in, and one by one they said to me, oh, gee, Brian, I don't think we can do that. I don't think you should announce that. 20% by 2010? Why, they said, we've already, how many times have you heard this? We've already obtained all the low-growing fruit. All the governors for the last 10 years, they've said we have to decrease our energy consumption. We've already done all the things that we can do. Remember that, Richard? They said, I don't think there's any more that we can do. But I'd done a little research before they came in, and I said to them, well, gee, boy, this is disturbing to hear this, but would it surprise you I did just a little bit of research before I decided to announce this? And they said, well, no, I expect you. So I said, you know what my research found for me? I found that the building where you have all of your offices that you're the director of, that building doesn't even have a meter on it. So you haven't any idea even how much natural gas and electricity you use let alone that you've decreased over the last 10 years. See, you have to challenge people to do better. In state government, we have what we call the A team, and then there's the B team. Let me tell you who the A team are. The A team are the ones that I get to appoint. And out of about 20,000 people, there's about 15 directors, and I actually get to appoint them. I call them the A team. You know who the B team would be? The B team are the ones who say, "We be here when you be gone." I'm not going to let bureaucracy wear us down. I don't have much time. You didn't hire me for a long time. You hired me for a short time to do a lot of work. So we will decrease our consumption of natural gas and electricity. We will decrease our carbon footprint, and we won't wait. Now let me ask you something. Are you prepared to do your part? Because I looked at Montana's consumption, the state of Montana's consumption of electricity and natural gas, and you know what I found out? That the university system uses about half of the electricity and natural gas that the state of Montana uses, about half. Now, I have an A team, and when they say to me, "Well, Brian, I don't know that I'm going to be able to decrease our consumption by 20% by 2010, I say, "Well, it's a good thing you told me now, because the one who's going to replace you, that actually will, they're going to have to accomplish even more if they don't start till next year." But I can't direct anybody at the University of Montana to use less energy. I can't say to the Board of Regents, "You must tell George to tell everybody here to decrease their consumption." I can't tell them over in Bozeman. I can't tell them in Billings and Dillon. I can ask you. So I guess I'm saying to those of you who are students at the University of Montana, are you going to be like the A team, or are you going to be like the B team? And are you going to allow another campus to decrease their consumption of natural gas and electricity more than you? Would you allow, for example, the Bobcats to beat you on the field of energy conservation? Well, I certainly would hope not. I would expect that there would be a competition here on the campus between the law school and the School of Journalism. Wouldn't you expect? The pharmacists? Wouldn't you expect the dorms would compete with one another? I'm going to leave it up to you. You figure it out. But I tell you what, if you're willing to do your part, I'm willing to do mine. Now, I am a member of the National Governors Association, as you might imagine, and every year the National Governors Association chooses one issue to work on. I think 3 years ago it was changing the high schools in America, and a couple of years ago it was preventative health care, and last year I think was innovation in American industry, and this year it is clean and green energy for America's future. Now, the chair of the National Governors Association is the governor of Minnesota, Tim Pawlenty. And he's a Republican, he's a good guy, friend of mine, and he picked 5 governors to be on this steering group. I don't know why the heck he picked me, but he did. Well, we were down in Florida. I still remember it was December 8th, not long ago. We were there, and we had a discussion about transportation fuels. And we'd invited the car manufacturers from across this country, the utilities, the coal companies, the gas companies, all of American industry. We were in St. Petersburg, Florida. And there was a room about this size, and I was talking to them about 2 important pieces of federal legislation that would change the world. I said to them, we need 2 pieces of legislation to make America energy independent and change our transportation fuels to a green fuel. This is the 2 pieces of legislation I recommend. Number 1, give a 15% tax credit to everybody in America that buys a plug-in hybrid. Number 2, force every utility in America to buy electricity from everybody on the system that they sell electricity to, and create a capitalist market, because as you might know, in the middle of the night we have excess capacity in our grid system, and at 10 o'clock in the morning we are pushed to the limit. Our problem is that we don't have any way of storing the electricity. Imagine if every garage in America had a car in it, and that car had 4 wheels and a big battery. Imagine if, for example, when you get home from work, you drive your car in the garage and you plug it in. You get out of your car, you walk in, you turn on the light, and the lights are hooked to the battery in your car. You make some coffee, battery of your car. Take a shower, hot water heater connected to the battery of your car. You check your email, battery of the car, make your meal again, battery of the car, watch some TV, battery of the car, read a book, battery of the car, go to bed, shut everything off in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning. When the grid has excess capacity, your smart car buys the electricity and stores the electricity, and when you awaken in the morning, your car is completely charged, you turn on the light and it comes from the battery of the car. Make your breakfast, battery of the car. You get in your car and drive to work, of course, still on electricity. You get to work, you plug it in again, you go into work. And about 10 o'clock in the morning, when electricity is now worth 4 or 5 or 6 times what you paid for it the night before, your car starts selling some electricity back into the grid. And so do millions and millions of other consumers. And then it stops because it has to have enough electricity for you to get home and go back through the cycle. Get a smart car. Well, laid this vision out for American industry. Imagine what happened on December 8th. The car manufacturers said, metaphorically, they tap me on the head and say, well, now, Governor, I don't think you understand. Really? What is it do I need to understand? Well, we do have the technology. We're making plug-in hybrids. We know that you've driven an electric car. We know that you've been in a plug-in hybrid. We know that you can convert a Prius for $20,000 to a plug-in Prius. We know all of those things, but the limiting factor to your vision is the battery manufacturing. It will take us about 30 years, they told me, General Motors and Chrysler and Ford, about 30 years to ramp up the manufacturing capacity to produce the batteries for this vision of yours. Okay, well, gee, I'm kind of listening. And then the utilities went after me. They said, oh, no, you don't understand the utility industry. We don't want to create a capitalist market. We don't want consumers to have the opportunity to sell electricity back to us for sometimes more than we had sold it to them. That isn't the way it works in the utility business. Actually, the way it works in the utility business, it's a regulated business, is these utilities, they get a franchise on selling you the electricity. They buy the electricity from somebody that has a big nuke or coal plant. They put that electricity in the wire. They get politicians to set the rate. They make a 12% profit. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. Can't go wrong. They get a 12% profit, and about 2% they give to the politicians to keep the system going. They like that system. So they said, no, we're not going to change anything. And I got to tell you, a room this size, American industry, the captains of innovation saying, we aren't going to change a dang thing. And finally, I said, today is December 8th. On December 7th, 1941, when we were attacked at Pearl Harbor, America had maybe the 8th most powerful military in the world. In a 4-year period, less time than we've been in Iraq, America built the world's largest industrial complex, trained the military, deployed, and defeated the tyrants in both Europe and Asia in 4 years. And you tell me when we are faced with the greatest crisis in the history of this country, it's 30 years? I was wrong, I told them. The tax credits should not go to the people who buy the plug-in hybrids. The tax credits should go to the people who build the boats to deliver the cars from China and Korea and Japan, who most assuredly will build the plug-in hybrids that will change the world. If we had batteries across this country on wheels, then the wind power of Montana would always have a market. You could put a solar panel on your house and charge your own car. When the wind blows, when the sun shines, there would be enough battery capacity across America. Now, I've done a little research on this, by the way. Battelle Labs, they studied in 2006, and they said that we could replace all imported oil with the existing grid. Not add one copper wire to our system, simply by the people of America having plug-in hybrids. Do you know that 93% of all the cars in America drive less than 40 miles in a day? So if you have a hybrid, 93% of all the miles driven could be replaced with electricity. Now, there from time to time you drive further and some people drive more, but 93%. That means we replace all imported oil. We shift within 10 years to a system that is clean and green. And this system would create the greatest number of billionaires in the history of this country. The captains of industry and innovation could sell this new clean and green energy to the entire world. We're not the only country that is hooked to these hydrocarbons. We're not the only people that are putting CO2 into the atmosphere. We could change the world, and we could change it in this generation. And we're not going to wait for those captains of industry. It's going to start today, and it's going to start in places like this. I have a question for you. Are you going to be the generation that says, oh, like the generation in the 70s that said, oh, I know the price of oil is high and we're in gas lines and we think that there may be a time in the future that there would be another energy system? Are you going to punt it on to the next generation? Or will you be the generation that creates this new energy system? Will you be the generation that develops electric cars and hydrogen technology? Can we be the generation that breaks this addiction once and for all? Can you be the generation that assures that not another generation will go to a war someplace around the world to protect an oil supply for a dictator? Is that something we can accomplish? And are we willing to do it even if the captains of industry will not lead? Will the leadership start in places like Missoula? That's the question. Are we prepared to lead, or are we prepared to follow? I was on a national talk radio show the other day, and it was actually a discussion of the Real ID, which I could get going on again. But this conservative talk radio guy was going after me, and he was saying, oh, Governor, you don't understand. We've got to stop the terrorists, and in order to do that, we've got to have a special ID and all the rest of it. And I tried to explain to him that it wasn't going to make anybody safer, and it's not going to change the immigration or anything else. And finally, I said to him, I need you to come to Montana. I'll take you out to a sheep ranch, and that will explain everything you need to know. He said, how so? Well, you go out to a sheep ranch, and I'd show you that what they do is they've got 5,000 head of sheep. And they pick two of them that they train. And they put a bell around their neck. And so that one sheep herder, he can start walking in a direction, and those two wethers, they look up and they say, well, we're following him. And they have bells, and the other 5,000 sheep follow the bell. Are we going to be just sheep that follow the bell, or are we going to think this through? Are we going to develop a system that is zero carbon based? Are we going to develop a system that decreases our carbon footprint? I think we can. But you're going to have to challenge people. You're going to have to challenge your political leaders. You're going to have to challenge industry. And in this process, there is room for everyone. If you're a journalist, you can write about the change. If you're a scientist, you can create the change. If you're a politician, you can talk about the change. There is room for everybody here to be involved in changing the world. We need you all. We need you pulling the rope, and you need you pulling the rope today. Now, I'm just the governor of Montana, but I do have the opportunity of introducing you to the president of the student body. Come on up here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Dustin Leftridge. I am the president of the Associated Students of the University of Montana, and we are very honored to have such an impressive group of leaders join us this evening to talk about climate change. I'd like to thank the governor and the panelists, who are going to come up in a second, for participating in this event, and the ASUM Sustainability Center, the Environmental Studies Program, and the University of Montana administration for all of their support. I would also like to make mention of the many faculty who participated in the Focus the Nation Teach-In Day. Students from the departments in modern and classical languages to chemistry and geography to English and the College of Technology were all involved in a campus-wide dialogue on climate change. And we hope that this is just the beginning of many campus-wide discussions on global warming that will lead to action and lead on climate change. The first panelist this evening is Anna Clinny. Dr. Anna Clinny is an associate professor in the University of Montana's Department of Geography. She teaches many courses, including an introduction to physical geography, meteorology, and a graduate seminar on global change. Dr. Clinny focuses her research on air temperature variability, the effects of urbanization, and hazards associated with changes in permafrost distribution under a changing climate in northern Alaska. Tonight, Dr. Clinny will talk about the impacts of climate change in Montana. And now I would like to invite not only Dr. Clinny, but the rest of the panelists to come up to the table. Thank you.
It is.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. This is a really nice opportunity to get together and discuss some of the issues in Montana related to climate change and how the climate has changed over the last 40 to 50 years, what we're projecting to see in the future, and what some of the solutions can be. And I think you're all familiar with the greenhouse effect. It's our standard format for describing the way in which adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere will increase temperature by changing the way that long-wave and short-wave radiation enter and exit the atmosphere. It was first described more than 150 years ago, and no one paid any attention to it until Charles Keeling started documenting the fact that the carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere were rising about 50 years ago. We've now extended that record back using ice cores. This only shows the last 10,000 years, but we've actually looked at carbon dioxide and methane concentrations for the last 650,000 years using ice cores. And at no point during that time did carbon dioxide concentrations go more than 300 parts per million. As you'll see, we usually define pre-industrial carbon dioxide concentrations at 280 parts per million. We've now raised that to about 390 parts per million. And we have a doubling scenario that we refer to of 560 parts per million. We're now also starting to refer to a tripling level, which would be 840 parts per million. This will come back to be important later. So what kind of current climate trends are we seeing in Montana? Well, if we first look at temperature, we see a very messy slide, and we have to think about the difference between weather and climate. And weather happens on the time scales of days to months. Climate happens on the time scales of years to decades. And the National Weather Service defines the climate normal as 30 years or more. So to talk about climate, we need to use statistics to summarize trends over time. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see that this is a 50-year mean trend in air temperature for various cities in Missoula, or in Montana, including Missoula, and we've seen a 1.8 degree Fahrenheit increase in our mean annual temperature over the last 50 years. If we look at March temperatures, you'll see that we've had a much more dramatic increase. Missoula is not leading the way here. We've had only a 4.6 degree Fahrenheit increase in our mean March temperature. Other cities have seen up to 7.7 degrees. And what this indicates is a real shift in when springtime is starting in Montana. And some gardeners may already have noticed this trend. If we dig a little bit deeper, we see that we've seen more changes in precipitation related to what kind of precipitation we're getting. This is looking at total snowfall in Montana in the average winter over time. And you'll see that here in Missoula, we get 22 less inches of snowfall each year or each winter than we did 40 years ago. Another way to look at climate is to look at some of the impacts that we have. And if you're a gardener, you're familiar with this picture. This is the standard map that you see on the back of a seed packet. And these are the plant hardiness zones that the USDA calculates every 30 years. Right now, we're still using the 1961 to 1990 calculations. However, the Arbor Day Foundation took it upon themselves in 2006 to update this map and use only the 15 years since 1990, so 1991 to 2005. And if I flip these back and forth, watch Montana. You can see we've shifted about a zone in some parts of the state. If you look into the Central Rockies, you'll see that they're seeing a similar kind of change. If you look in the Midwest, it's a systematic shift northward. And even in San Diego and Southern California, we see a shift. Oops. And if you look at the legend on the right, you'll see that those are based on mean minimum temperatures for the year. Over 15 years, which isn't quite long enough to be climate, but it's coming awfully close, we've seen real shifts. And if we look at the difference between those two maps, the pink color is a shift of one zone, and the red colors are a shift of two zones. You'll see large sections of the country that have increased their planting zone. And you could see this from the positive view, that this means your tomatoes are going to do better. You could see this, that maybe you're going to try something that wouldn't quite fit in this zone before. Or you could say this is a systematic shift due to climate change. And this is going to affect all of the species that we could have affected by minimum annual temperatures. That's just one example. We have many, many examples, including those associated with Glacier National Park. I think everyone here is familiar with these. We're going to have a talk by Dan Fegre in about 10 days as the second of our lecture series on climate change this spring, and he'll tell us some more things about what's happening in Glacier National Park. And the other example that I have to mention is forest fires. We're all familiar with the recent spate of very severe forest fire seasons that we've had. And over the last 20 years, we have had a 78-day increase in the average length of our fire season, more than 2 months. We also have had a four-fold increase in the number of forest fires that are larger than 1,000 acres, a six-fold increase in the total number of acres burned. And all of those could be related somewhat to forest management practices as well as climate change. But the one that's really directly related to climate change is an increase in the forest fires happening above 6,500 feet. This is just getting into the subalpine fir and the whitebark pine. And we don't think those ecosystems burned in any like this fashion for many years. What kind of changes can we expect in the future? For this, we're going to turn to the IPCC that was released last year and some of their scenarios where they run a series of expectations, usually related to the doubling of CO2 by 2100. And they use a variety of models to look at these. And this is a little bit of a complicated graph. If we start in the upper right and look at that graph, that shows winter temperatures over January, February, and December. And the left-hand axis, or the y-axis, is precipitation change, and the x-axis is temperature change. And the top is going to be winter. And if we look just at winter and the bottom axis right now, we can see that all of the different scenarios that we've run there, and there's over half a dozen, are going to predict that by 2050, we're going to be expecting temperatures about 3 degrees warmer in the wintertime. And if we look in the bottom graph, same setup, the summer temperatures are going to warm by 3 to 4, and the spread's a bit larger during the summer. So all year round, we're going to be warmer by about 3 degrees Celsius or about 5.5 degrees Fahrenheit, which doesn't necessarily sound like that much. If we look at the other axis, the y-axis, we're looking at precipitation. And you'll see that during the summertime, or during the wintertime, we're seeing a decrease of about 10% in most of those models. 10% less precipitation in the winter. Pardon me, 10% more precipitation in the winter. And if you look at the lower graph, we'll see a decrease of 10% in precipitation during the summertime. So what we're seeing is warmer, wetter winters and warmer, drier summers. When you think about what that means to the person here who's going to be living here in 2050, think back to last summer. Last summer was horrid in Missoula. July, we set a new record temperature of 107 Fahrenheit at the airport. Our average temperature was 78.1, 11 degrees above normal. Now, we just said that we were going to be about 5.5 degrees warmer in the summer. This isn't going to be that unusual. And we were looking at scenarios for 2050. If we run them out to 2100, we're looking at this magnitude of change. Can you imagine last summer being typical? We had over half the month where we didn't get below 60 degrees at night. There's going to be a lot of impacts associated with that kind of a temperature and precipitation change. And one of the big ones is going to be on our hydrologic systems. And the governor said some things about this already, and I'll just show it to you in a graph form. This is a chart showing the Columbia River flow at the Dales corrected for the fact that we have dams. This is what it should look like if we didn't have the dams. And that dashed kind of cream-colored line is the present flow. And you'll see that we have a peak in the middle of May or late June. By 2050, we predict that we will have a shift by over a month in when we get that peak flow, because we will be having earlier snowmelt and earlier runoff in the springtime and less snow altogether. And so we'll see a shift, and it doesn't look like that big a deal. But if you look at the area under the curve, between the blue prediction and that cream-colored dashed line, we see that we have 30 to 50% less water available in the river in the summer. And that's available for you to keep your fish alive, or for you to irrigate, or for you to do whatever you need that water to do, including power generation in the Northwest. And that's the kind of thing we're looking at in just 50 years. The governor alluded to some of these other impacts as well. Earlier crop planting dates, we may see the crop seasons shift forward by about a month. We're going to see different behavior in our hibernating animals, lots of impacts on our aquatic systems. So what do we need to do now? We need to cut our carbon emissions. And it's easy to say that, and it's hard to think about what that really means. And I'm going to show you just one proposal that two scientists put forth in 2004 that they mainly meant to stimulate discussion. They wanted to show you ways that you actually could begin to fathom how much we could reduce in how long of a time. And this is the stabilization triangle. And we see on the left-hand side of the graph the rise in carbon emissions over time, over about 50 years. And then we see 2004. We can substitute 2008 for that. We're still approximately at that point, although we've actually been emitting at a slightly higher rate over the last 4 years than we had thought we would. If we continue on that current path for 50 years, we're heading towards at least a tripling of CO2. If we wait 50 years before we do anything and then flatline, we're going to stabilize at about 850 parts per million. When climate scientists run their scenarios, we run them for a doubling of CO2. We run them for 560. So when we tell you what terrible things are going to happen in 2100, that's assuming a doubling. We don't want to talk about a tripling, because all of the impacts will be that much more severe. So what we would like to do is flatline right about where we are now in 2008 and avoid doubling our CO2. We're probably not going to be able to manage that, but maybe we could come close. And then eventually, say in 2050, we would like to start heading downhill, so we're decreasing our emissions even more. So all we have to do are find ways to build that triangle. And we can separate that triangle into wedges. At least this is according to Sokolow and Pacala, who put this forth. Their idea is that if each wedge was just 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions, we would need 7 wedges to get to where we need to be by 2050. And we have a variety of sources that we could use to make those wedges. And the idea behind this is that we just have to think of 7, but we could think of 10, or we could do half a wedge from 15 sources, and we would get to the same point. They can come from all different areas. We could use energy conservation. We could use carbon capture and sequestration. We could switch to nuclear fuel. We could switch to renewable energies. We could change our soil management practices and agricultural practices. We could do major reforestation. Any of those could contribute a wedge. These wedges are doable. They're conceivable. They're things that we can think about. So for instance, these are just examples. These are 4 examples. They published 15 in their paper, and they challenged people to come up with more. The first one here, and I just picked out a few examples, is doubling the efficiency of 2 billion cars, going from 30 miles per gallon to 60 miles per gallon. Do you think that's technologically feasible? It's the choice between the Hummer and the Prius, right? And that's today's technology, not technology in 50 years. We could sequester carbon equal to today's output in oil. We could increase our wind capacity by 50 times, or we could adopt conservation tillage practices around much of the world. I think wind energy would be a very popular alternative in Montana. We're well on our way to getting started, and there's a lot more potential that we could exploit in the state. And I have to say that usually these talks are fairly depressing, and they're somewhat hard to make into a positive outcome. This map is a satellite composite from 1994 and 5, and there's an updated one for 2003 and 4. And this shows a variety of things. The white lights show cities around the world. The red lights are forest fires that happened during that year, or fires of all kinds. The green are gas flares from natural gas fields and oil fields around the world. You can notice this particularly nice green spot in Siberia. And the blue lights off the coast are where we shine lights in the water to attract squid to fishing boats. And that's actually really expanded in the last 10 years off of the coast of South America as well. If you look at this, look at how much of the world we're impacting today, or 10 years ago. It's gotten bigger in 2003 and 4. All we have to do is change how we're impacting the world. We can change that. It's a decision that we make. And it's a thing that we can do. We just have to make that choice. Thank you.
Everybody, Max here. I think it's just great that all of you are getting together at the university to discuss global warming. Clearly a big issue, could well be the most important overriding issue in our lifetime, and it's just super that young people like you are getting together. I wish I could be there with you so we can discuss this. It's so important. It's not going to go away, global warming. It's here. We need to find solutions not only at a national and international level, but also locally at home. And that's why it's really important for all of you to take a very active role and get involved. I commend you, Len, as a head of your environmental studies program for spearheading this event. It's a great idea, Len. Thanks for getting people together. Obviously sitting down, probing each other's ideas and working at it, that's going to help us find some solutions. In the Senate, as a senior member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, I've worked with Senators John Warner and Joe Lieberman to get legislation passed that will address climate change. I inserted several provisions that will not only help stop global warming nationally, worldwide, but also in our state, Montana, as well. One would provide, one provision I put in would establish a new wildfire fighting trust fund account, which would set aside about $1.1 billion every year to fight fires as a result of climate change. I think this will really help cash-strapped agencies struggle every year to meet the growing demands for fire suppression all across the West. We've certainly had a big bad fire year last summer. And this will help because I think climate change does help, unfortunately, does cause more wildfires. I also included some incentives for the coal industry, so important in our state, to develop and use carbon capture and carbon sequestration technology. We've got to capture carbon and sequester it. Also incentives for our state's farmers to create carbon offsets through activities like no-till farming, and also protection from rising energy prices for Montana's rural electric co-ops. These are just a few of the provisions I've helped get in the bill, but I think they'll help. They'll be significant in combating global warming and create some good paying jobs at home. I believe very deeply that all of us have a very basic duty to leave this world to our children in a better place than we found it. It's a moral obligation each of us has. America's Climate Security Act, which passed the committee and will now be considered by the full Senate, I think will help make the United States a leader. We need to lead in the United States, a leader both in fighting global warming and developing the technologies that will drive the next industrial revolution. The bill will reduce U.S. emissions 70% below 2005 levels by the year 2050. That's significant. It's a step in the right direction, and I'm committed to working together with my colleagues to get it passed and signed into law. So what can you do? Well, I've talked about what we're doing at a national level. at a local level and in our everyday lives, we can all take steps. Each of us can do little things that can help make a difference. We can turn off lights when we leave a room. That's a pretty easy one. Buy energy-efficient light bulbs and appliances. And we can also carpool to school or to work. We can also look for ways to live carbon-neutral lives. I know that that's one of UM's goals, is to find ways to be more carbon neutral. I think that's great. I myself signed up for an interesting program last September to offset all the plane flights I take back and forth from Washington to Montana. This will help establish a carbon neutral footprint. Not a big deal, but it helps. No matter what it is, I challenge each of you to find at least one thing you can do every day to help with global warming. There's always something. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak with all of you. Good luck. This is really great what you're doing. You're going to have a terrific event tonight, and I commend you for participating in this national event. I hope tonight propels you to do even more events like this one. So I say to you, keep raising the awareness of global warming and engaging others to find solutions. I know personally, by working together, it almost always helps to work together, we can start putting a dent in global warming and start turning things around for the better for America and for the world. After all, we want our children and our children's children to enjoy places like the beauty of Glacier National Park for years to come, which is such a vital part of our state's outdoor heritage. All the very best, and thanks again for what you're doing.
All right. Well, moving from a national to state level. Oh, no, that was great. No, I wasn't inferring that at all. All right, so moving from a national to state level, we are honored to have Richard Opper join us tonight to talk about climate change policy in Montana. Mr. Opper is the director of the Montana Department of Environmental Quality and a member of the Montana Climate Change Advisory Committee. He has worked with a statewide citizen committee to develop recommendations to reduce the state emissions of greenhouse gases. Please welcome Mr. Opper.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad to be here. This is a good turnout. I'm really impressed with how many people are here. And Dr. Clenny, thank you for your talk. It did depress the hell out of me. I think I'm going to go to the Lady Grizz game. Is it still going on now? We've got a better crowd here. Smarter crowd anyway. You know, we do have, don't tell them I said that. You know, I remember the days way back when, maybe even as recently as 2 years ago, when only a few, you know, weird, wacko Missoula science types like Dr. Clenny or Steve Running in particular were talking about climate change. Things have really changed since then. You know, really just in the last couple of years. Everybody's talking about climate change now. Even Max Baucus is talking about climate change. I'm talking about climate change. We're all here to learn about it. The good news is people like Dr. Running are still talking about climate change. Well, not in Shoto, but you know, he's, yeah. That was a little dig on one of our sister communities there. So, but anyway, we've got a ways to go now. Even though more people are talking about this, we still have a ways to go to raise public awareness. We've got some issues on the national level, as we know. We've got a president who doesn't believe in forcefully addressing this issue. Now, I understand there's going to be a change in administration one of these days, so it will be better, okay? If you can just wait a little while, at least on the climate change front, things will be better. Yeah. And I've got to tell you, you know, I give a lot of talks. It's just the nature of the job. It's part of what I have to do in my role as the director of DEQ. Just about the only time I get applause is when I bash Bush. So I do it all the time. Anyway, I think all of you know now the United States is the only industrialized country in the world now that hasn't signed on to the Kyoto Protocol. Australia had a change in administration. They joined us in our Neanderthal way of thinking earlier, but they've moved on. We're the only industrialized nation now not to have signed on. We've got some problems in Congress. We've got Max, who is on top of this issue, and we've got John Tester now, who is very supportive. But, you know, Congress is they're slow in even agreeing on what kind of carbon cap we need for this country to establish a carbon cap. And eventually that is something we're going to need. We're going to need the federal level folks in Congress to set a very strict carbon cap for this country that gets lower with time, so that all of us have to figure out how we're going to comply. We're smart enough to figure out how to comply, but we need that kind of direction from them. They just took the bold step of setting CAFE standards for automobile vehicles, miles per gallon. I think it was 35 miles a gallon in the year 2020. I mean, hell, we should have gotten 35 miles a gallon 25 years ago. We should be approaching the triple digits now. But, you know, we took the lessons that we learned from the Arab oil embargo in 1973, and we did figure out how to build a Humvee. That was a nice picture, by the way. It looked just like mine. No, I'm teasing. I actually ride a scooter when the weather is permitting, and when I'm brave enough to be on the road with the thing. But yeah, we don't have the kind of leadership at the federal level we need at this point. I think we all know that. So that's going to change eventually. I mean, you probably heard the story about the fellow who was driving to work, got a cell phone call from his wife who said, some damn fool is driving the wrong way on the highway. And he yells back at her in a panicked voice. He says, it's not just one person, it's everybody. Well, that's kind of how our leadership in D.C. is a little bit. Everybody in the world is telling us we're wrong about this one. So we'll learn. We'll get the message eventually. We'll realize we're going the wrong way on the highway. So the general public here in Montana is on board with this issue. Not only do most Montanans believe that we are going to potentially suffer very serious impacts from climate change, but 63% of the population here 63% of us are willing to take some major sacrifices, to undertake major sacrifices to cut back on our greenhouse gas emissions. That means paying more for energy. 63%. Now, you can't really trust this poll because it was a Billings Gazette poll taken last December, and you know that bastion of liberalism over there in with that newspaper. So it's probably skewed. So it may be 62.5%, But anyway, that's really good information to have because we keep hearing people aren't willing to pay, they aren't willing to sacrifice. That's not true. All of us are willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to embarrass myself by riding a scooter, a bright red scooter no less, to work, and park it next to the people who ride Harleys. And so if I'm willing to do that, I think we all should be willing to sacrifice. So. We've got some issues with some of our state legislators in the state because I don't think all of our legislators have caught up with the rest of the public here. I was at a legislative committee hearing the other day. One of the members called climate change junk science. I was at another hearing, and one of the legislators referred to climate change as a theory. He wouldn't give it any more credence than that. There was another legislator who published a letter to the editor extolling the benefits of carbon dioxide emissions because they're essential for plant life, saying we need to produce more of this stuff. So we've got a ways to go, so please help us to send legislators, Democrats and Republicans, I don't care what political party, but send people to hell in the next session who take this issue seriously to help us because we're trying to get some things done. So despite all this, Montana is addressing the issue. The governor pointed this out. We've been working for the last year or so with this very diverse group to put together recommendations that we can consider to reduce Montana's carbon footprint. I've got just a couple of slides here I'm going to show. And thanks. Yeah, I wasn't strong enough. I needed that. But I ride a scooter, you know. So this was a very diverse committee. They looked at hundreds and hundreds of options for reducing our carbon emissions. They came out with 54 recommendations. All but part of one were adopted unanimously. This was not exactly a homogeneous group because we had people from the Montana Environmental Information Center, MEIC, and we had people on it from the coal-fired power plant that's being proposed for Great Falls. So those two don't exactly see eye to eye, and yet all these recommendations were made unanimously. So I'm not going to go over the details. I will go over a little bit of some of the themes that came out of this report. And we've got a few hard copies, but not very many. I don't think there are enough to go around. But I've got I'll put the website on this. Now, this PowerPoint that was put together, I might add, I put it together initially, and it's the technological equivalent of stick figures. I'm not very good at this. But then my son got involved, and so there may be a few bells and whistles here. He added a bunch of pictures and, you know, things like floating up out of nowhere. So anyway, I'm going to go over just a little bit of the inventory of Montana's greenhouse gas emissions. We do produce 0.6% of the greenhouse gases in this country. Not a very big percentage all in all, but we only have about 3/1000ths of the population in this country. And what that means is that Montana produces per capita more greenhouse gases than average in the average person in this country. That's not something that looks good on, you know, the license tags. You know, Montana, we produce more gas than most. We don't. That's not good for the Chamber of Commerce. So, you know, the reason we do this, it's not dietary. I found out. I did some research. That's the good news. It's because of our agricultural practices. It's because of the vast distances we have to travel from point A to point B. And it's because we produce electricity here. We export electricity in Montana. 40 to 50%, depending upon the year, of the electricity that's produced in Montana is exported to other states. And about 65% of that electricity comes from coal. Most of the rest of it comes from hydropower and now some wind. We have had an increase of 14 to 15% in our greenhouse gas emissions since the year 1990, the last time we did an inventory. We used to be a carbon sink in this state because we had so many forest lands that hadn't yet burned up and so many undeveloped spaces. But now we are a net emitter. That's changed as we produce more electricity, as we've developed the state more. So we're a net emitter of 12 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. And the main sources of these emissions are agriculture, electricity, transportation. Okay, that's the address of the Montana Department of Environmental Quality's website. You can go to that address there and find a copy of our climate change report. This is an interesting map my son found. So here in Ecuador, actually we do produce about as much greenhouse gas emissions as the country of Ecuador. Our neighbors to the south, New Zealand, I wish New Zealand was that close, frankly. You'll notice that they produce about 70% more carbon dioxide than does Montana. And they are a big coal state, of course. Another interesting thing I noticed, Texas produces really about twice as much, 3 times as much greenhouse gas as does the whole state of New York. So Texas is a very big producer there. Okay. The tools that were used by the committee throughout this report to try to get us to the reductions that we need to see in our greenhouse gas emissions were conservation, renewable energy, and carbon sequestration and other technologies, clean coal technologies. And they're listed this way in order for a reason, because conservation and efficiency improvements are cheaper, they're easier. It gets more expensive as you move down this list, okay? And they're harder to do and they're more expensive, so. Okay. Okay, themes from the report. There were a couple of themes that emerged in most of these recommendations. One was to lead by example, and you know, I think the governor is all over this one. If you want to tell you the truth, you heard him talk. He's kind of animated, don't you think? He's really pretty well spoken for somebody who has a master's degree from MSU in soil science. just like I do, I might add. Boy, talk about poisoning the well. That was a great introduction, Gov. Thank you. Anyway, the themes were leading by example. If we are going to expect other people in the state, people at the universities, businesses, people, just individuals around the state, citizens of the state, to cut back, to make sacrifices, we in state government need to be able to do that too. We need to step up to the plate and be first to do that. Another theme was to join other efforts like the Western Climate Initiative that the governor talked about. And one of the reasons we're talking about joining other regional initiatives is Montana does not want to become a dumping ground for gas-guzzling automobiles or for very inefficient appliances. A lot of the states around us now are looking at adopting standards that would require that only efficient appliances and fuel-efficient vehicles are sold there. So we want to join these efforts. Montana can't have much of an impact on the market. I mean, we are a leader in fashion, everybody knows that, but we're not necessarily a big influence on the overall market. So joining other efforts was part of it. The third theme was this carrot and stick approach, which was a combination of regulations. That's where I come in. Boy, everybody loves a regulator, so yeah, that's actually the stick, not the carrot. So it's a combination of regulations and incentives, incentives for doing the right thing. Okay, the overall goal for this committee, the near-term goal, was to reduce statewide emissions to 1990 levels by the year 2020. Whoa. That was my son's fault. I almost put a picture of the governor here, but Jag is just much more photogenic, don't you think? So you heard the governor talk about his 20 by 10 initiative. He's very serious about that. Again, this is the leading by example. DEQ is really heading up this effort, and so we are working with other state agencies to try to help them develop plans to reduce their energy load, their energy use, and in doing so, reducing their carbon footprint. So real quickly here, there are 5 tools we're going to use to reduce our own energy. One of them is building operation and maintenance, low-cost measures. This is doing things like putting in programmable thermostats in buildings, lighting change-outs, the easy stuff that some of us haven't done, some of the agencies haven't done. The other one has to do with capital improvements. Number 2, those are the bigger investments, changing out the heating and air conditioning systems, replacing windows, spending real money to try to get conservation in some of the state buildings. There's a third category, education, trying to get behavioral changes involved in people. For this, we're going to do things, we're going to offer training to other agencies, we're going to maintain a state website with good ideas for people to use, we're going to be taking away people's space heaters. Yeah, we're going to be very popular for that. Purchasing, that's going to be a very interesting one because we're making a real commitment to buy green now in state government. We're going to do that wherever possible. Not just green appliances, not just green products made from recycled materials, but when we lease new buildings for state offices, we're going to make sure that there's an energy efficiency component built into those buildings to give landlords an incentive to build greener buildings. And then the last one has to do with vehicles. So that's all that's all I've got for my slides. I have noticed there tends to be an inverse relationship between the size of an organization, size of an agency, and its efficiency. That's why I like comparing myself to the federal government because we are so damn much more efficient than them. But we are state, and we are hard to move. We're going to be making changes, and I'm going to be proud of those. I'm going to look back on those with pride. But I expect to hear now from the mayor of Missoula that they're going to be even more efficient than the state in achieving some savings. So look forward to hearing him. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. So our next panelist doesn't really need much of an introduction in this room. Mayor Engen has been the mayor of Missoula since 2006, and he is a signatory to the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. And as the mayor, he has put together an advisory task force on climate change in Missoula. Mayor Engen, thank you.
Dustin, thank you very much. Thank you, Richard. Richard, by the way, does a weekly show in Helena. It's a nightclub shtick. It's fantastic, and I think you should catch it next time you're in town. Thank you, Richard, for. Yeah, exactly. Thanks for coming over. And you know, one of the things that Richard has expressed here is and you heard it from the governor as well, is that we have some responsibility and some real opportunity to act locally. And as a leader of local government, I have tremendous faith in our capacity to make change on the local level. We get it done faster, we get it done better, and we get it done cheaper, with all due respect to my friends from Helena and from Washington, D.C. in some cases. So we're working on a few things. Part of my job here this evening, ladies and gentlemen, is to be brief enough that you can ask questions, because everyone else has gone long here, with the exception of Dr. Clenny. So I'll be, I hope, mercifully brief for you. I also want you to know that I'm a founding member of Montanans for the eradication of PowerPoint, which tends to make my remarks go a little bit faster. I'd never have any luck with the technology either. Want to tell you a couple of things that are happening at the city. And some things have been really at play for a long time. We've had intelligent, progressive leadership at City Hall and on City Council and in the volunteer ranks for a number of years. Are a couple of members of the City Council's Greenhouse Gas and Energy Conservation Subcommittee, which has been working for years and years now on these issues. Before it was particularly popular to talk about clean and green, and I suspect there's some vindication at this point for some of those folks, but I think they're also thinking we're not moving quickly enough. I also have an advisory group that helps me and is helping me try to find some of what we call this low-hanging fruit, some of the projects we can engage in pretty quickly that get us some results pretty quickly as well. I'm not the guy who's going to build the hydrogen plant. I'm not the guy who's going to build the wind farm. I'm going to encourage that. I'll do everything I can to support those efforts. But what I do is fill potholes, and we hope figure out ways to engage in conservation. Conservation is the easiest and least expensive way for us to get, I think, to where we want to be. We want to do our part with one of the wedges. So we have some opportunity. I used to drive a Prius. I outgrown it slightly, and we can debate that later during the question and answer if you'd like. Contrary to what you may have heard, however, I do not drive a Hummer that runs on a hybrid technology of baby seals and coal. I do drive a Mercury Mariner hybrid at this point that's slightly larger and still tempers its emissions considerably. We also have a hybrid GMC pickup truck at our sewer plant, and it's tough to get guys who drive big pickup trucks to understand that when it turns off at the intersection, you can still go. But we're getting there, and those are some changes, and we continue to work on our fleet. Another conservation piece that we engage in pretty regularly is this time of year, the mayor calls you if he sees your city vehicle idling anywhere, including our parking lot. And it happens. And people forget that you just need to turn the car off once in a while. It's low-hanging fruit, but it makes a difference. We heat our vehicle maintenance facility with recycled oil, which is not particularly sexy, but it saves money and it recycles. We've done the compact fluorescent piece throughout our facilities, and when we build new facilities, we make sure they're as green as they can be, and our hope is as we move forward with a police facility that building will be LEED certified. We are, pardon me, We are recycling throughout City Hall. We need to do more of that. And I'm having conversations with local vendors about how we create opportunities for real curbside recycling in Missoula. It shouldn't be that tough, and we really need to get that done. We're working on that. At our wastewater plant, we produce all manner of byproduct. One of those is methane, and we use that to heat our boilers. And we've also started a pilot project. One of the byproducts of wastewater treatment is nitrogen. We're going to do some land applications. We're going to grow poplars on about 3 acres at our treatment plant. Those poplars will take up nitrogen. They'll also do the breathing that plants do, which is beautiful. And we've got folks who want to use those poplars for building projects. So little circle of life going on out there, and it all starts with a flush of a toilet, which is a beautiful thing. For us at the City of Missoula, climate change and conservation and sustainability is largely about design. You all came here from somewhere this evening, and some of you did it on hoof, some of it you did it on 2 wheels, and some of you on 4 wheels. And those of you who came to us on 4 wheels experienced our road system. Well, we can make choices about where we put roads and how they're designed so that they maximize community building in effect. So we're going to have a roundabout here soon, we hope. We're going to talk to our friends at the state a little more about that soon as well. Another department though, Richard, you're in the clear. And what does a roundabout do, aside from freak people out to begin with? It stops idling. You don't sit and wait at a roundabout. You actually move traffic. What we used to call malfunction junction malfunctions, and as a product of that function, tons and tons of emissions aren't in the air anymore because people aren't sitting there and idling the way they did years ago. We can make all sorts of design choices in our communities that temper emissions. We can put services close to people so that people can walk to services. That's a possibility. We can take advantage of what we call our urban core and the infrastructure that's in place, so we don't have to build new infrastructure, maintain new infrastructure, and again, force people to get in vehicles to do what they do, to live their lives. It's slow, it's imperfect, and it's not without complication. I know that as well as anybody in the room at this point, probably. But we have to start thinking about how we build our communities so that we don't build communities that don't work in the world we live in. So, I said I'd be brief. Community recycling efforts, packaged liquor, no, that's a different speech. That's it. Let me suggest a couple of other things really quickly. Missoula was one of the first 300 communities to sign on to the mayor's climate change agreement, which matches Kyoto protocols. Now there are more than 700 cities in the United States that are signed onto that agreement. Those 700 cities represent a huge percentage of the United States population. So while the feds aren't doing it, local folks are doing it around the country. So we're not alone in this. We've got a lot of support on the municipal level throughout the country, and clearly we've got leadership on the state level. So we're moving ahead, I think, in meaningful ways. The other sort of sexy piece of this is that clean and green is also about economic development and good jobs. As a mayor from Oakland, California, suggested to me at a recent conference, you cannot outsource somebody who's installing solar panels on your roof. It just doesn't work. You have to have somebody who's trained to do it, and you have to have them available, and it's all good. So those are some of the pieces that are going on. Again, in terms of making things happen on a local level. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Finally, our last panelist, Phil Condon, is an associate professor in the Environmental Studies program at the University of Montana. From 2004 to 2006, Mr. Condon served as the chair of the University of Montana Sustainable Campus Committee, and today he is still an active committee member. He is a faculty advisor to the Campus Greenhouse Gas Inventory Initiative, and he is the University of Montana's representative to the American College and Universities President's Climate Commitment. Please welcome Mr. Phil Condon.
Thank you all. I've got my watch out, and wherever I am in 10 minutes, I'm going to stop. So, because I'm really looking forward to questions too. Those of you who know me may wonder what in the world I'm doing up here. I'm primarily a writer and a teacher of writing, nature and environmental writing. What am I doing here talking about sustainability and climate change in terms of the University of Montana? There are days when I ask myself that too. But most times I feel really privileged. The last 4 years I've been on, as Dustin said, the Sustainable Campus Committee, and I want to talk to you about that committee, and really I'll just go through a few things that some of you may know, but I have a feeling a lot of you may not know about all that's going on at UM, all that is in progress, has happened, and the challenge that we face and the mechanisms that the Sustainable Campus Committee and others, I think, believe we need to follow to move forward. But since I am a writer, I'm going to just take the liberty of changing perspective just for a moment. I want to just offer a quote from one of my favorite writers, Linda Hogan. She's a Native American Chickasaw novelist, essayist, and poet. And in a book I try to teach every year, Dwellings, she ends an essay with this line: "The whole world is a nest on its humble tilt in the maze of the universe, holding us." So that's just a different, maybe a little more poetic, a different metaphor, a different perspective that I think still captures the dilemma we're all facing in UM and Missoula and Montana and in the world today. This nest is holding us, and we're changing it drastically. In the Environmental Studies program, and I think in the Sustainable Campus Committee also, we believe climate change is the problem, and sustainability and all the ways that can apply is the solution. And so that's what I want to talk about a little bit tonight, as far as what is going on and what needs to go on and what can go on here, right here at University of Montana, in terms of sustainability as a solution to the problem. And I'm going to steal a line nobody else has. So from a webcast we watched in December, quite a few of us, a national webcast on this issue from campuses around the country, and somebody said a great line. I thought, they said sustainability, and sometimes people roll their eyes and say, sustainability takes forever. And that's the point. It is a different way of looking at our impact and a different time frame. So just a brief history and just kind of a sense of what's going on. And this is very partial. I'll leave a lot of things out. There's more going on than I know about and before I was involved. But in 2002, President Dennison signed UM onto the Talawar Declaration, an international higher ed declaration of 10 principles of sustainability. And out of that, UM was the first university in the United States in the Northwest to sign on to that. Out of that came the creation of the Sustainable Campus Committee. And I'm stressing this because I want you to contact the committee. I want you to go to our website and Greening UM. It's a diverse committee, 3 students, 3 faculty, 3 staff members, 3 administrators that rotate. And that committee has been working on suggestions, annual reports, on sustainable ideas, solutions here at UM since 2002. In the fall of '06, a half-time sustainability coordinator student position was created out of Facility Services, our operations unit here, with the support of the SCC and ASUM. And that person, Emily Peters, is right now is working on these issues out of their offices, and has started a lot of sustainability initiative teams among students. She's looking for students to get involved, to propose projects. You can find that website too, the SIT, Sustainability Initiative Teams, off the UM homepage, and most of the things I'm mentioning here are set up in the back tonight also. So that was a big step forward. And in just this last fall, as of this year, ASUM, Associated Students, and the President's Office and SCC, but mostly through the leadership of the current ASUM Senate, established another half-time student sustainability coordinator position, Jessie Davey, and you can contact her or contact ASUM. Again, I'm just trying to throw out things for those of you who are wondering what to do, how to get involved, who to contact. There's multiple resources that we really want you to contact and talk to us about. So there's 2 of these half-time student positions. We're working toward, the SEC has recommended toward a full-time staff position to oversee all of these efforts and coordinate them. And again, those are 2 primary resources on the Greening UM website and the SIT website. Dustin mentioned that I'm the liaison to the American College and University President's climate commitment, which was another big step just February of last year that the President took. So I don't think we're short on leadership at the top to get us going in the right direction at all here. UM signed on, one of the first 100 universities in the country, there are now 500, to a much more accountable commitment than the Talawar Declaration. It's a nationwide commitment. All the colleges are sharing information, and this has benchmarks and timelines that we are involved in right now on this campus, and we're looking for more people to get involved with us to help us on. Right now, the ASUM Sustainability Coordinator is spearheading the effort all across campus to do our baseline greenhouse gas inventory, which we need so that then we can begin to measure as we go to, forward in the climate commitment that the university has now signed on to, which is toward climate and carbon neutrality. So once we get this inventory and know where we stand and can quantify it, then we can look for sustainable solutions to honor this commitment that we've made to all these other universities. And the goal is to have 1,000 universities within another year. So we're right in that stage right now. And there's so many other things that are going on here. We've filed an initial report with the National Organization for Climate Commitment, and with 2 major steps that we're already taking here at UM. ASUM Transportation is quite ahead of the curve. You've seen the buses, you've seen how the Grizz card, we can ride the buses, at trying to get people to come to campus in ways other than private cars. We turned that in as a positive interim step. We also turned in a Energy Star purchasing policy. Vice President Derringer is codifying that so that all branches of the university will only buy Energy Star appliances in any application. And those are just 2 interim steps. And as I said, over the next year, we're going to be completing this inventory, and then from that inventory, the committee and many other people from around the campus are charged with, within a year, by September '09, coming up with a comprehensive plan, probably some shorter term and longer term plans to move toward climate and carbon neutrality. And I guess speaking just for myself, but I think I could speak for the Sustainable Campus Committee, as we make that plan, I think it's certainly, we would welcome trying to accept the governor's challenge of 20% reduction by 2010. But that's ongoing, and again, we need student, faculty, and staff input and support from all around campus to make that happen, because no matter So what I'm trying to say is that I believe UM is really well positioned. I believe we've done a lot. We've had a lot of leadership. There's a lot of people working on the issue on campus, but as all these other speakers have shown, the problem is urgent. The problem becomes, as we discover more, is more urgent than we had thought, and moving faster, so we have no time to waste. The IPCC recommendation is 80% reduction by 2050, so 42 years from now. And I look back to 1966, I can remember that year pretty clearly, so that seems like a long time and not very long at all. And so that's kind of the minimum guideline that I think cities, universities, states are all going to have to be basically adopting something like that and figuring out the steps to get to that. So I guess I'll just close by, again, speaking to anybody here who's faculty or staff or student or a member of the university committee. A lot of you are involved already, but if you aren't, there's tables at the back right now as an outreach. You can contact ASUM or go to the Greening UM website or the SIT website and do get involved. And exercises like today in my class, a nature writing class, we talked about climate change. Students wrote about climate change. I know it happened in many classes around campus. The idea is talk to your fellow students, your fellow faculty, ask your teachers how you can get this into your classes. We need everybody talking about it and the conversation broadening every day so that we can get good input as we make these long-range plans to move toward climate neutrality at the University of Montana. And I'll close with that, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Phil. Let's give our panel one more round of applause. So let's open it up for questions. We have a bit of time. There is a microphone right there, and Jesse is walking around with a microphone. So if you have a question, just raise your hand, and Jesse will find you.
Richard, I'm going to make you put on your regulator hat here for a minute and ask you if you can fill us in on the direction the state's going to take on coal-fired plants. There are proposals for new plants, and there's potential to upgrade existing plants, get them and encourage them to do carbon sequestration technology or do other demonstration projects. What kinds of approaches is the DEQ thinking about to deal with coal as a power source here in Montana?
Well, I'm really shocked that question came. Yeah, and I'm shocked to be singled out among this distinguished panel for a question. Is this on, by the way? Okay. So I don't need to shout as much as I'm shouting? Okay. That is the question right now that's facing the state in general. We issued, when I first got here, we had issued the permit to the Southern Montana Electric Power Plant in Great Falls. And I've told people for, ever since then, I would bet money that that would be the last permit that DEQ will ever issue in history, the future of the state for a traditional coal-fired power plant. Because things are changing right now. We all know that. We are in a tremendous state of transition right now because everybody knows we're going to have to do things differently. Everybody knows we're going to have to rely on new technology. The problem is that technology hasn't matured yet. And in our legislative framework, too, the statutory framework under which we have to operate hasn't changed yet. And based on some of those horror stories I told you about some of the legislators we work with, that's going to be a while. And one of the things I don't like about my job is I have to follow those pesky laws. Occasionally I might find some gray area, but we are going to have to develop a regulatory framework that's going to require new technology to be used on plants. And not just tweaking around the edges, but some very fundamental changes. Now, the good news is during this transition, I think that a lot of things are going to dictate that the market's going to change anyway. We're going to be using cleaner technology, like the IPCC power generation from coal that at least enables the capture of carbon. We still don't know what to do with it once we capture it. And right now, capturing carbon takes about 20 to 25% of the power that a plant produces. So again, the technology is not great. But the markets are dictating clean technology, clean power, and the financial community is dictating that. And the recognition of climate change is all driving us towards this new technology. What that means is things are going to change. They're going to change quickly. More options are going to become available. And when we do have to fill this power for a while longer with coal, because coal is not going to go away, it won't be long before we'll be able to do it better, and we're going to have a regulatory framework. So I'll have better laws that I can enforce. That's the best I can give you right now.
This question is both for Richard Opper and for Mayor Engen. I really appreciate your leadership in, leading by example and taking steps you can within your own lives and your agencies and whatnot. And I think what I'd like to do is kind of just push you to respond to how we can go a little bit further with the building industry in particular, because from your slides you were showing that residential uses of energy are, a tremendous source of carbon dioxide. And I'm getting the sense that there's just not a lot of resources at the local level that, Mayor, that you like to provide, more tools for local builders and whatnot to do things, but that you don't have an office or a staff or a carbon dioxide czar, so to speak, or someone to provide those resources or tools or outreach. And I think that from what I understand is that the state often plays a big role in providing those tools for the city. So I'd like both of you to just share some ideas that you might have to bring more energy efficient furnaces, super insulated homes, on-demand water heaters, all the things that regular citizens can do to do their part, and that also when we're building new subdivisions that we might be able to really make a difference, because as we're bringing in more and more people that are using energy less efficiently, we're adding wedges as we go along, and if we're going to be taking them away, we need to really get, is it regulatory, is it information? What are your ideas about that?
Well, Richard graciously provided me the microphone so I could go first. A number of things come to mind. First, the notion of a sustainability or a CO2 czar for the city of Missoula is actually pretty attractive. One of the difficulties with these sorts of programs is unless you have someone running the program, it's every department head and every staff member trying to take a little piece of it in addition to whatever else they do. So we sort of lose focus, and that's one of the challenges I think we'll face in our next budget year, is trying to figure out how we manage that so that we do some things programmatically that move us forward. A number of communities around the United States are legislating and regulating building materials and requiring types of efficiency. There are all sorts of ways to provide, as Richard mentioned earlier, we've got carrots and sticks. I think there are all sorts of ways that we can at least think about offering some incentives for not only green building efforts, but sustainable development efforts. It takes a couple of things. One is cooperation, and as one of my staff members often reminds me, education. His favorite quote is, if you're not doing something with someone, they think you're doing it to them. So we need to work with the building community as well to put some of those pieces together, but we need to legislate, which means we need to have at least 7 people on a Monday night say, let's move forward with some of these programs. So we're going to continue to chip away at those pieces as well.
You know, we live in ridiculously large houses located way too far away from where we work. Not all of us, but it's true. And we keep moving farther and farther away from the city, so we don't have to pay city services for water and sewer.
Which is a mistake.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more with you. There are a lot of things broken in this system. So one thing we can really do is pray for high energy prices, because that is going to bring on more change than any regulations that we're going to come up with anytime soon. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Is it on now? I just have a question for Richard Opper. Your carbon sequestration, that's a great idea and all that, but isn't it, just something to think about, isn't it possible that, like, because of human arrogance, that, like, we possibly can't even fathom what sequestering carbon could do? We have no idea. I mean, that could, like, completely devastate our ecosystem in 100 years. We have no idea. Just something to think about. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. It's a very high-stakes game because there are so many liability questions, because what happens 25 years from now when the Earth burps? You know, we don't know who owns the pore spaces. We don't even know who's going to, where the plume is going to migrate to if we were to put liquid carbon dioxide underground. There are a lot of issues to be worked out here, and it is a very, very complex problem right now. Again, the technology and the regulatory framework is quite immature along these lines right now. Carbon sequestration is a way to buy time until we can transition to a new type of energy future. I don't know what that's going to look like, but it's I guess some would say it's better than the alternative of putting it directly in the sky, but there are a lot of issues to work out. I agree.
Well, I know it's getting late. Thanks for all of your patience. Let's take 2 more questions, and we can end the evening.
Thank you. No mention has been made tonight of another possible solution, or one of the wedges, and that is shifting from a meat-based diet to a plant-based diet. And Dr. Clenny mentioned that agriculture was one of the 3 primary contributors in the state of Montana to global greenhouse gases. If that's the case, and I know that beef production is number 1 in terms of the economy of the state, and maybe people are shying away from suggesting that we should cut down on meat consumption because we are so dependent economically upon this industry. But isn't it true that we could contribute significantly to a reduction in greenhouse gases, both carbon dioxide and methane, by the way, by cutting down on the production and consumption of beef and other meat products?
We're debating. I'm not up to speed on what the relative percentages are of how much of our agriculture is devoted to cattle production versus other crop production. Certainly, cattle production does take a lot of resources. And I think we could all come up with arguments as to why we should eat less beef for our health that would support that argument. A lot of what we were talking about in the example I was showing actually was changing in tillage and changing in crop rotation practices, much more closely aligned with grain harvests than they were with cattle. We could probably come up with another wedge if we changed how much beef we're eating worldwide. And that actually probably would qualify for a wedge all on its own. I think you'll find that in Montana, even the ranchers are really cooperative and supportive of climate change initiatives. They wouldn't mind raising less beef if you raise the price per pound. They just want to keep their ranches. I think there's a viable solution in there somewhere if we could find the right economics to do it.
I could, Dr. Clenny, real quickly here, what would make a much bigger impact than not eating meat is to eat local. Missoula's got the best farmers market in the state, far and away. It's not operational right now, I noticed, but take advantage of it. Eat local. Don't spend money to ship products from overseas all the way over here. It's a mistake, so eat local.
Yeah, and I'm probably the last person to talk to about diets of any kind. But Richard, I think Richard's exactly right. I think we have a real opportunity here to take food off the road and support folks locally. So,
just to make it local to UM, I just want to say too, on the local food issue, that's something that people at UM really have been working on. The Environmental Studies program has the Peas Farm, the Rattlesnake Valley Program for Ecological Agriculture and Society, run by Josh Slotnick, and it's a terrific learning opportunity about all these kinds of issues, including what carbon impacts are on transporting food. There's also the Farm to College program on this campus that is working off that same dynamic, trying to reduce the distance food travels and therefore its impact on the environment.
I have a bit of a comment more than a question, and I'd appreciate your comments afterward. And I certainly applaud your efforts to advance green energy. But after listening to, this is directed at you, Mayor Engen, and the governor, if he were here, after hearing you speak tonight, it sounds to me like the strategy is to go to industry and business and say, what can we accomplish? How fast can we cut? And use those guidelines to come back with a plan for percent 25 by 25, for example, instead of asking nature and asking the scientists, what do we need to cut? And nature is telling us that we need to act fast and that we need to act now. We're losing glaciers in Glacier Park by 2030. We've got wildfires that last 73 days longer than they used to. And we have the Greenland and West Antarctic ice sheets that are risking destabilization. And scientists are telling us we need to move, and we need to move now. And I'm really happy the governor said it tonight. He said, we need to challenge people to do better. And so I'm asking you to challenge yourself and to challenge us to do better. So what are you doing to push the envelope here and to change the conversation from 25% by 25, which may not be fast enough? We're at 382, and we've never been at 382. We've never been above 350 parts per million before. We're in uncharted territory. So I'd appreciate your comments. Thanks.
I won't pretend to speak for the governor for lots of reasons, but I'll do my best to speak for myself and for at least our process locally. As much as I understand the passion of you wanting to push things harder, part of what I do every day is balance all of the folks who want to push everything harder, and trying to balance resources, energy, and the personalities who are in the business of governing in our community. So while there are tremendous efficiencies to benevolent dictatorship, our system today is a little slow. It speeds up, however, if you bring 100 people to a room on Monday night and say, we'd like you to do A, B, and C. If you want to bring us ideas and remind us relentlessly what you think we ought to do, because we don't have all the answers, and we have some capacity for leadership. We're more or less, I think, doing our best. But if there are folks who have passion and expertise and energy and the commitment to help us get things done, then come and tell us how we ought to proceed, and get enough people to remind us relentlessly that we need to keep chugging away. And it works for all sorts of things, not, that it's sort of the time-honored way of getting things done, especially on a local level, is gather enough people, preferably registered voters, and you might be surprised how quickly we can move. But we are systemically not built for some of that. That said, I think we are kind of doing our best here, and we can always do better.
Well, as the night comes to a close, I would like to thank our panel for coming out this evening. And Director Opera, I hope you have a warm ride home on the scooter. I would like to thank Len Broberg for helping set up the Focus of the Nation, and the ASUM Sustainability Coordinator, Jessie Davey, for all of the work that she's done. So please visit the tables in the back, see what's going on campus, find out how you can become involved, and work locally to change this issue. We're all in it together, so if we all work together, we can figure this out.